Hello, everybody. How you guys doing? Good? All right. I get to wrangle everybody. We're not talking about dApps anymore. You guys can talk about that afterwards if you like to. My name is Dom. I work with CoinMe. We are a crypto financial services company about 45 stories down from here. We also have the crypto ATM over there, and I am really excited to get out of the way and let these incredibly brilliant people speak here. The panel is Mobilizing the Social Impact of Blockchain. When Jonathan asked me if I wanted to moderate a panel, I was very nervous because of the amount of knowledge and brain power in this room. And then he asked me if I wanted to do this, and it was with some wonderful faces, and I was like, sure, why not? Let's go ahead and do that. Because I personally think that this is super important. We talk about technology, we talk about what those impacts are, and we are on this planet, we're all on this planet together, so how can we actually do things for good? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to step out of the way, and starting on my right, I would like if you guys can introduce yourself, your company, what you do, and sort of how you feel like you fit into this panel. So take it away.
Great, thanks, Dom. My name is Rostin Memon. I'm the head of marketing at BToken. We're a company based in San Francisco that offers a decentralized home sharing. So Simon already basically did a great pitch for us on the use case for an Airbnb on the blockchain. So that's what we're doing. I think the social impact aspect is just something that it's a personal passion of mine, and it's something that I've worked on at a previous startup. And blockchain just offers a tremendous opportunity to continue that.
Hi, my name is Alexandra Guerra. I am a co-founder at Nori, and we're a blockchain startup over there in Ballard on a mission to reverse climate change. So the resident tree hugger, I find the use case of blockchain to do something about our environmental impact incredibly compelling.
Hi, I'm Mike Cartwright. I'm the CTO of a company called Digital Town, a public company based in Bellevue. We deliver technology that encourages people to interact with the local community and to support their local retailers through a smart wallet that reduces the cost of doing transactions for those local retailers.
Awesome. I'm Alex Ortiz, Chief Blockchain Evangelist with the LifeID team, and we're building a platform for self-sovereign identity, specifically to create decentralized identifiers and to be able to use those in ways that preserve privacy and reduce correlation risk and do some really other cool stuff. But I decided to join this team because I think technology can and should be used for good, and we should use technology as a tool to heal, to teach, to free, and I really believe identity is at the intersection of many exciting use cases that in the future will actually help us change the world. So really excited to be here with all of you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. So the first question that I had, I'm actually going to, I'll start with Alex, and if we just sort of want to move down the panel. With blockchain being so new, by when do you think the biggest social impact of the technologies that you are all working on will be felt?
What is it? Under promise, over deliver. I think in terms of business use case in the near term, probably 2019, 2020, and then long-term massive social impact of self-sovereign identity, I don't know, 2022 to 2030, because we're still building, right? All of us in this room are building. We're all building stuff right now. What we're building is a way to create and use self-sovereign identities. Self-sovereign identities are identities that can be used for a particular purpose, that are made up of information that you control, right? And so the means to create these identities, for instance, I can create one identity that's self-sovereign to prove I'm over 21. I can create a different self-sovereign identity to prove I'm eligible to vote in Washington State, right? So I'd have to prove I'm over 18 years old and that I'm a resident of the state. I could create another self-sovereign identity that I'm an Amazon Prime member, and that I can prove that. And the interesting thing is that I can then keep those identities separate from each other, and that the information about one identity can't be correlated to information in another one, right? And that's, from a consumer standpoint, that's really cool. I get to protect my privacy. But we're still building that technology, and how that will be then used across a variety of use cases, some of which will be social impact based, will probably take a long time to actually see. So for now, we are building, and that's what we're focused on.
I'd like to make a comment on self-sovereign identity. We've talked today quite a lot, I think, about identity. And I always think about it in terms of the car industry. You don't go to a garage and order an airbag or a seatbelt. I think with self-sovereign identity, companies have a duty of care almost to add this layer of security to their products, because I think if we try and educate the general public on what is self-sovereign identity, that's a really hard discussion to have. So by building this technology in and giving people that reassurance that their data is secure, they control their identity and control their data, I think we're in a pretty good place.
I just have a comment on, I think it all depends on the language we use. Self-sovereign identity, would you use that at the dinner table with your grandmother? No. She would just look past me and smile, and she's got a sweet smile. So I think it's really important to think about everything that we're doing all day long, and while we have internal speak, how do we present this in a format that the masses will adopt, and how do we socialize that and increase the literacy for all of society if we want blockchain for social impact to actually be impactful. Just an aside.
Yeah, I think that there's a few issues that I see that are holding it back. So as a DApp, obviously it's the user interface, the user experience that just doesn't exist. There's the education aspect. I think a lot of people here, came into blockchain and cryptocurrency as speculators, and it's just how do you convert from this idea that it's just purely an investment to it's a real world application and a use case for it. It's difficult. I think it's just a question of many companies sort of building that, as Alex said. And the third one, I think, is custodianship. I'm just really concerned. I'm thinking about like a small charity, maybe they are a homeless shelter or something like that, and just imagining them losing their private key and basically all of the money just disappears. And, with that, everything that they've done. So that's another thing that needs to be fixed.
It's a really good point. I do want to touch really quick on like the idea of that education that we were talking about. So, we have a bunch of leaders in the space in blockchain, yourselves included. What do you guys think are some like actual things that we in the industry can do around that education piece to be able to help move forward this? Like, 2019 would be great, but yesterday would be better. So what can we do to help, sort of speed up that education at all?
So I think there was an announcement, last week that Starbucks are going to start accepting Bitcoin. So, what's happening is the conversations that we have around cryptocurrencies are becoming mainstream. People are curious, people are interested. But my colleague's point here, the language we choose, the way we communicate has to be very, very careful. We can't barge in talking about self-sovereign identity. 99% of the population don't have a clue what we're talking about. So what I'd like to see is, these new forms of currencies become more of an everyday currency that you can spend on the high street to buy everyday items. And I think as it becomes more prolific, people will want to know more, and it'll be easier to explain to them what this is all about.
Right, so the value of it, as that increases, will encourage more people to want to understand it better. And I think that the perfect avenue for that is to do it through local community engagement. So I think a lot of startups in the blockchain space are focusing what can they do to apply their solution locally. And as that community finds value in it, then the whole community becomes educated, and it's just this network that builds off of each other. And other cities will see the example of another and hopefully feed into that.
Yeah, I would add that one of the things that I'm learning as I'm now in this industry is that the best, most successful companies in the world are very customer obsessed, right? They're obsessed in understanding what problems they're trying to solve for which customers and building these solutions in a way they actually want to use. So, not to make this conversation all about SSI, self-sovereign identity, but for us, it's how are we going to build this technology in a way that will be wonderful to use, and that drives adoption. And then it's not like you're educating customers necessarily on the value of self-sovereign identity. If we build it in a way that they want to use it and there's mass adoption, then the education is in. So I don't care how Uber works. I don't care how JavaScript works. I just use these things that make my life easier or make my experience on the web more wonderful. And so education, I think long term, we'll spend less time actually educating people if we spend more time building fantastic platforms and products.
I have to add on to that. I love that, Alex. Snaps all the way. I was just nodding my head vigorously. And I think at Nori, we say this all the time, is start with why. Yes. If you start with why you're building Life ID and why you're working on it, someone's like, yeah, that's a compelling reason. Who here wants, or who here thinks that global warming is a thing? Who here would like to see global warming reversed? Yeah, okay. So then I've engaged you in a conversation. You're going to ask me, well, how are you going to reverse climate change? And what does blockchain have to do with that? And let the questions lead. And so if we start with language that's not off-putting, and if we start with the heart a little bit and the why, like this is the problem I'm trying to solve, and lead people in, they will follow you on that journey and bring them in. And also, not to be braggadocious, but Nori has a really good podcast called the Reversing Climate Change podcast. Alex was on it.
It's fantastic.
It's so great. We have amazing guests. But I think things like that, where you have podcasts and you really try to reach out to people who are in your communities or in other states working on different solutions, and talk about the implications of what you're working on, and not necessarily like the nuts and bolts of blockchain and we're using Ethereum to do this and that, I think is another good piece. Podcasts are great. I mean, everybody listens to them. I'm done.
No, that's great. You guys are throwing out so much stuff. I'm like trying to figure out where these questions can actually fit in. And I am going to leave time for you guys to ask some questions too, so make sure to jot those down as you think of them. But you know, as I was thinking about this panel and thinking about blockchain and obviously social impact, and you know, a lot of your companies really just fit right into there. But there might be some that are here that might not have such an obvious social impact, right? Thinking about business and bottom line. So how do you sort of tie together social impact with like your core, with like the core business objectives? Like, what are some of your thoughts on how to ride that line?
Sure, I can talk about that from a digital town perspective with a real world example. So, my company is all about encouraging people to engage with their community and with retailers. Many of us, as we travel around the world, can see the impact that a small number of large organizations are having on Main Street. We have a lot of coffee shops and nail salons and so on, but small retailers, I say small, even Toys R Us, are going out of business. So in order to encourage people to engage with those businesses, we created a very local sort of token economy, whereby when people create local content in terms of community projects, events, volunteer their time, we reward them with tokens. We're saying you're a good citizen, you're doing good for your community. But then rather than penalize the retailer and have them discount products and so on, we created a value proposition for the retailer to say, hey, if you can get people to come into your store and spend these tokens with you, then we'll give you value for those tokens as well. So I think there's a way of rewarding people, and blockchain is a perfect mechanism for this, rewarding people for doing good in their community and encouraging them to engage with local retailers. And I think that's a very positive project.
Yeah, I think maybe I took a little bit of a different perspective as opposed to going top down. It's just something that maybe all companies can relate to. When I built out my marketing team, I made sure that everyone was interested in social impact and volunteering and change. And once you build that culture in and everyone's passionate about it, I think you just naturally find opportunities within your business model. Because otherwise, you run the risk of just making it look like a giant PR stunt. And I think that's what everyone here is trying to avoid. So we want to make real change.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So the topic of connecting the corporation, your corporate values to your social mission, and you're solving problems that are business problems, let's say, or technology problems, but that doesn't mean you can't be really clear on, say, your emotional purpose. So I'm a big believer also in defining your why, right? And more recently, I had coffee with an individual who described have a professional purpose and then have an emotional purpose too, right? And like Ripple recently donated $29 million to Donors Choose projects or some such. And like, that's great, right? If you have that kind of money, put that into doing good. But money's not the only way to accomplish good. All good is really accomplished through people using tools and using money in some cases. So it made me think about company values. So Salesforce, for instance, has this 1-1-1 model where 1% of all employees' time goes to volunteer, paid volunteering on whatever the employees care about, and 1% of their products go to nonprofits and things like that. What's fascinating is that Salesforce has been around for 19 years, and that 1-1-1 model is 18 years old there. So like our team is all of a year and change old, we also could define our corporate philosophy that has as part of it accomplishing good through our people and through our values. And I think we all have the responsibility as blockchain companies to do that no matter how young we are.
It's fantastic. Just really good. I just like I keep forgetting that I'm not sitting out there and I'm supposed to ask the next question. I'm like, yeah, it's awesome. Take down some notes. I do want to put you guys on the spot. This is not a question that I actually posed to you guys beforehand, but I would love to know if you have any examples of companies that are not ones that you work for, that you see social impact moving forward that those companies in the blockchain space may be doing.
So I think there's a wonderful program. I believe it's global. As you can tell, I've lost my American accent due to all the travel I do, called 1% for the Planet. And I know there's a lot of great companies, small to major corporations, that support that. I would say this isn't a blockchain conversation. This is just a general company conversation.
Awesome. Anybody else? Any examples? I know I'm putting you on the spot. That's a horrible thing to do.
I have one. So Regen.network is focused, they're a partner of ours, and they're focused on ecosystem services. Again, jargon that's specific to a particular industry, but looking at our lands and how do we measure different improvements in the lands over time. So land erosion is a big deal. And I just, not so much to this question, but to the general theme, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier, I don't think that blockchain companies are required or should use blockchain as a means for doing good. I think individuals should want to do that. And I think that we should be wary, too, of the fact that while I love that this is the focus of the conversation, how can we use blockchain for social impact, we also should be wary of the fact that there are other people and other corporations who will use a tool just like any tool could be used for purposes of malice. So how can we also use blockchain as defense mechanisms to protect those and the rights to their data and their property and their identity? Super meta.
I like it. All right, so we have about 5 minutes left. I want to open up some questions for you guys. All right, we got plenty right here in the front.
So wonderful question. Is the Life ID team currently working on use cases like what's being done in Jordanian camps where they've got, say, Syrian refugees that are there? There's an on-site grocery store, and the UN actually created its own private Ethereum-based payment network, and then the individuals that are there are allotted a certain amount of funds per week to purchase goods for themselves, and there's some self-sovereign identity that's part of that. So we're not currently at that level yet, right? We're still building our platform, which is going to be an on-ramp for the creation of self-sovereign identities and for users to actually manage those identities. And we have to build out our ecosystem of partners to enable those sorts of use cases. That just sitting on the sorts of calls that the working groups at W3C that are involved in this kind of work, the use cases are so broad. This is foundational technology. We happen to be one of the companies that's a little newer in that space. We do have competitors that are further along, but use cases like that are personally very close to my heart. I do, something that Alexandra just said really resonated with me, which I understood to be, let's solve problems we understand very deeply, right? Let's not just throw blockchain at things. Let's start with what's in our domain of expertise and get really good at that. And then let's take the time to listen and learn about why problems happen. And then if we can map our solutions to those problems, that'd be fantastic. But say, we don't understand the problems that lead, say, to homelessness yet well enough to even try to apply self-sovereign identity to that. Does that help answer your question?
If I can add a comment to that, I think standards are key here. Interoperability is something that we all have to be very cognizant of. I know for a fact that Alex's team are working with W3C around the definition of the standards for decentralized identity and DIDs specifically. So I think that's very, very important.
In the back.
Yeah, so I have a question around market. So most of you all are startups in the self-stock and identity space. A lot of those are startups. What do you think the value add behind market enterprises? I work for Microsoft. We are very well in
Yes.
see and ISV. So what do you think the value add is there for large enterprises in the space?
Yeah, my perspective is there's a ton of value there, right? Because you already are very close. So Microsoft is customer obsessed. It's one of those companies that it's like, I heard a quote recently by Satya that was like, if you want to be cool, go work for someone else. If you want to make your customers cool, come work for us, right? So a company like Microsoft that is super close to customers and their pain points and their problems, you have these huge networks of companies and enterprises you work with and that already trust you. Once companies like us that are smaller build these on-ramps to this technology that we live and breathe and grok and that we formed companies around from the beginning, then partnering with enterprises like yourselves and then having you help us reach the entire world with what we've built, I think that that's incredibly valuable.
There's an old saying, if you're not paying for the product, you probably are the product. And I think that large organizations need to take a step back and think, well, okay, are we actually going to go down the route of, self-sovereign identity and enable people to have control over their data? Or are we going to continue to monetize that data? So I think any large organization has to take a step back and make that decision because, it affects their business model at the end of the day.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. Right there.
I apologize if you spoke to this while I was out of the room, but I understand the future going forward.
May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention, please? The electrical service is stabilized. All elevators and HVAC have been restored.
All right.
Elevator servicing floors 14 through 21. Repeat, all elevators, with the exception of floors 14 through 21, are back in service with HVAC being restored. We apologize for the inconvenience and appreciate your patience. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right.
I'm so glad I just had a hip replacement. Anyway, for those, I can see the future in terms of the identity, but how do I get back to target?
That's a great question, and I don't think there's an easy answer to that. The hope would be if organizations start to adopt this model, if there's general, consensus and pressure for companies to adopt this, then you will regain control over it. But, I have got young kids, and I say to them, be careful what you put out there on social media. The internet doesn't forget unless you fill a form in and apply for it to be forgotten, I believe.
It's like what we heard a little bit earlier, right? Like the problems of the past are still here. So just have to continue to protect against them. All right.
Real quick,
so
what's your name? Yeah. Fanula, can I promise you a blog post answering that or at least take an attempt to answer that? Awesome.
they're great blog posts too. If you're haven't read his blog posts, they're phenomenal. All right, so the question that I have for you guys, you can ask this amongst yourselves. What can your company or project, so turn it internal, what can you do to be able to have some social impact on your local community? All right, thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you guys so much.